Hello, this is my Physics Lab 5, Falling Slinky. So the introduction or purpose of this lab, the purpose is to predict and analyze the motion of a slinky stretched out and falling from rest. And our goal is to use computational models and tracker analysis to figure out how the slinky moves while it's moving or while it's falling. And so the models and physical principles that we're using are a self-created computational model in GlowScript, Newton's second law, which is the momentum principle, so the position update formula and the velocity update formula, and then the forces due to gravity, spring force, and drag force. And a preview of the results is that the bottom of the slinky remains at rest because tension and drag force cancel out. So here's the system surroundings and initial conditions. The system is the slinky, the surroundings is everything else. The initial conditions are that the mass of the slinky is 0.25 kilograms, and then there's the initial position, which is calibrated using the Veritasium video. The height is 1.75 meters, and the velocity is 0 because it starts at rest. The relevant formulas, velocity update formula, position update formula, the force due to gravity, spring force, and then also we have drag force, which is Fd equals negative b, which is a constant, times velocity squared times v hat, which is the direction. And here's just a diagram of how like springs work in general in terms of like the spring force and the force due to gravity. It'll point parallel to the orientation of the spring, and it'll vary based off the spring is compressed or stretched. And then here's more diagrams of what's kind of going on in the experiment. So we can see that pointing up is the force of the spring and force of drag, and pointing down is the force of gravity, which we'll find out later that they do cancel out. So in my tracker analysis, I plotted all the points after calibrating using a calibration stick, and we kind of figured out like the movement of the slinky as it goes down. As you can see on the right over here, we have like the graph of the slinky or the graph of the bottom of the slinky as it's like staying constant, and then it'll eventually drop. And here's my GlowScript code. Here we're setting the initial conditions, so the position, velocity, time, delta t, gravity, and the unit vector. And here's the actual code. So we're applying the velocity update formulas and position update formulas in two separate calculation loops. So on the left, we have the motion prediction. And then on the right, we have just a second calculation loop for for the spring. And yeah, so we're just using Newton's second law, and we're also factoring in drag, spring force, gravity, all of that. And here's the GlowScript results, which is kind of close to what we got in our tracker analysis. As we can see on this slide, they're very similar. Like we start straight, like not really with any movement, but then we have like a linear decrease. I mean, not linear, but we just have a decrease. And here's like a comparison of the observed versus computational. So some similarities and differences are that we have a similar graph pattern. It's constant and then decreasing. And then we do see some slight differences due to tracker inaccuracy in the two graphs. And that can be attributed to error. So some possible error that we could have had are choosing points in tracker when we were doing our observed motion, not centering the slinky correctly, having non-ideal drag. So our drag constant was done through trial and error, and then human error in general, just in terms of how we did the experiment. And so why do we use these principles? Newton's second law allows us to predict velocity and position between time steps, so that's why we use that. Drag and tension are the main forces responsible for the slinky's movement from rest. And so these forces, along with Newton's second law, allow us to predict what the movement of the slinky is going to be like, and that's why we use these principles. And what does it mean? So for our what does it mean question, we're going to ask why did the bottom of the slinky stay stationary? And the reason for this is because gravity and tension are actually equal to each other, so there is no net force, and the bottom of the slinky is actually going to stay in the same place. And then what if the slinky was thrown downwards, or for example, like with initial velocity, that would mean that it's not at rest when released, and we would get similar results. However, the bottom of the slinky would be moving because